Thank you for watching the Citizens Report with William Donahue. Your regularly scheduled programming has been canceled by your choice to be conscious. Remember, America, stand up for your children. You decide the future. You decide your fate. Thank you for watching the Citizens Report. My name is William Donahue. For today's show, I'm going to talk a little bit about Trump, the coup that's currently going on, Venezuela and Maduro, news about illegal aliens, and the economy, and a whole lot more. So before I get into that, please like and share this information. It's important that people understand what's going on because everything I'm going to talk about is coming together to a head kind of at the same time. Um, our system was created on a system of freedoms and liberties and natural born inalienable rights. Also, we operate on a system of morals and the belief that children are innocent, women, should be protected and treated like a woman, like a lady in society. So we have standards that our system is built on. And right now, all those standards are being flipped upside down, which is why things like this are allowed to happen. So it's important that people, one, understand what's going on, understand why it's wrong, and stand up against these things because for too long we've let things slide where they've been able to get to this point. So there's like a false sense of security in society where people think that everything's okay and you can ignore politics. People like to separate themselves from politics, but pretty soon, politics and everything that I'm going to talk about is going to directly affect your life in the short term. So, we've allowed things like this to take place to the point where they get to this point, and now there's backlash about it. So, GOP lawmakers furious after Olympic boxer who failed gender test last year dominates female opponent. Imain Khalif of Algeria, after being disqualified from the 2023 International Boxing Association finals for not meeting the organization's eligibility requirements, Khalif on Thursday marked a decided victory against opponent Angela Carini of Italy, who abandoned their fight after 46 seconds. A tearful Carini told reporters after the match she pulled out because she felt something was not right after being battered by Khalif. So she pulls out of the fight. I have a clip. It's a slow motion of him punching her in the face, and her head flies around. A very hard hit, and I'll let you watch the clip, and then I'll come back to it. So, if you're anything like me, there's a little radar in the back of your head when you're watching that, and you think to yourself, what I'm seeing is not right. There's something wrong with what I'm looking at. And that is him punching her in the face like that. That is wrong and should not be allowed in women's sports. Another thing that makes no sense: three men accused of plotting 9/11 reach plea deal with the Pentagon. Three men accused of plotting the 11th of September 2001 attack on the U.S. have entered into a pre-trial agreement with the Department of Defense, or the Department of Defense says, in exchange for prosecution agreeing not to seek the death penalty. The trio have pled guilty to all charged offenses. including the murder of 2,976 people listed in the charge sheet. So these people are responsible for the death of nearly 3,000 people. They're reaching a plea deal. They're not going to face the death penalty. Now, there's a couple things, a couple layers to this. So they're not going to reach the death penalty, but people who have done less murders, very inhumane things, but less killing, have gotten the death penalty. They have done more killing, and probably, I don't know if you'd say more inhumane or how you'd judge that, more killing, and they're not going to face the death penalty. Now, I don't decide who gets to live and who gets to die, but they put themselves in a position to choose who lives and who dies. They killed people. Okay, so then the government comes in and says, this guy's a problem. Now we need to give him the death penalty. So they've done that with people who've done less murders, inhumane things, but less murders. These guys have done 3,000, nearly 3,000 murders, and the government's saying, well, they can get a plea agreement, and we're not going to put them to death. So that is one inequality in the justice system. And then you look at Donald Trump has 34 felony charges for filing something wrong on his taxes. It was a non-disclosure agreement, which I'm not a lawyer, but in my opinion, that is a legal fee to me. But they're saying it wasn't a legal fee. He filed it that way. Now, if he faces all the charges and gets the maximum sentence, which probably won't happen, but if he does, he's looking at potentially spending the rest of his life in a jail cell for filing a tax document wrong. But these guys who killed 3,000 people are going to get spared the death penalty, um, which, I mean, they're two totally different things, but this one had zero injured parties. And, the rest of his life in prison is a pretty bad sentence for that, compared to what these guys did, and they won't get the maximum penalty. So that's a big thing that the families are upset about. The families of the victims of these people are upset that we reached this plea agreement, and I don't agree with it. I don't pick who lives and who dies, but these guys here don't deserve to be spared over somebody who's done far less. I don't agree with the scale that's being used for making these judgments. Lawmakers Marshall and Gates call for probes into big tech's alleged censorship of Trump assassination attempt. Seek Google and DHS testimony. So Google is being accused of doing its part to memory hole one of the most serious incidents in American politics in decades. The attempted assassination of former president, now presidential candidate Donald Trump. Google's search engine is leaving out the relevant results in the auto-suggest feature, thus decreasing the likelihood of users learning more about the event and, importantly, investigating it. Senator Roger Marshall, a Republican who is a member of the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, has announced a probe into this behavior, blasting Google at the same time for yet again engaging in the censorship of conservatives and demonstrating willful discrimination against President Trump and users of the search engine. So Google's trying to cover up this assassination attempt so nobody could look into it. Also, the Secret Service seems to be attempting to cover up this assassination attempt. This letter is written to the Honorable Robert L. Lowe, or Ronald L. Lowe Jr. Dear Acting Director Rowe, Acting Director of the Secret Service. Now, these documents that he's talking about, the recent evidence that's come up, he's talking about knowing who's in charge and who did what. Now, they're saying that this Ronald L. Rowe was the leader of the planning of the event. He was the guy that directed the whole Secret Service the day of the Butler, Pennsylvania rally.
Under oath that his agency didn't cut resources from Trump's detail.
If you're talking about Butler, Pennsylvania, all assets requested were approved. If you're talking about the media reporting of assets requested, there were times when assets were unavailable and not able to be filled, and those gaps were staffed with state and local law enforcement tactical assets.
That's a lie, period. And lying to Congress is a felony. A Secret Service whistleblower is telling Senator Hawley that guy personally directed that Secret Service agents who do threat assessments at events be cut.
So he writes, this is Josh Hawley writing to Ronald Rowe, saying, since your testimony before the Senate of July 30th, new and disturbing information has come to light about Secret Service planning for the Butler, Pennsylvania Trump campaign and your own involvement. So he's saying, please provide the following information to me no later than August 8th, 2024. Initially, they wanted to release the information in 60 days. Now, this is what is being asked of them. All responsive records during your time as director, a deputy director, in which policy and personnel changes were made to CSD, the Secret Service Division that specially performs advanced site threat assessments. The nature of your personal involvement in revising, updating, or otherwise changing Secret Service policies and personnel related to CSD. The number of Secret Service agents who have raised concerns about security practices within the Secret Service and are currently facing disciplinary action, as well as the nature of the concerns and the type of disciplinary action. The breakdown of the Secret Service personnel at the July 13th rally by division or by unit. I await your response, Josh Hawley. So basically, stuff is coming out. Josh Hawley asked Ronald Rowe, was anyone fired or who was in charge? He asked him a couple questions, and he said at the end of the question, he goes, and by the way, I know the names. So he put him on blast. Ronald Rowe comes back with a phony answer, completely a lie, a perjury on the stage, on the Senate floor, and committed multiple felonies. So that was my little update on the Trump assassination attempt. So there's a lot of people asking a lot of questions, but not a lot of answers yet. I do have a slight correction. Based on analysis of a photograph of the gun, people are saying there might have been a 45-degree mounted sight where Crooks would have shot the one way and then adjusted and shot the other way, which could explain the ejection pattern of the bullets on the roof. I don't know. People are also saying that maybe when they detained him, they took the gun away from him in case he was still alive, which might explain why the gun was 7-8 feet across the roof away from him on his non-dominant side. So this section, or this article is just one article about Kamala Harris. Democrats begin process to nominate Harris for president. What to know? So it says Harris, who was thrust into the presidential race after President Joe Biden dropped his bid for re-election, is the only candidate being considered in the roll call vote. What happened to Dean Phillips or the other guy or whatever? Biden was number one, voted by the people in the primary election to be the number one candidate. So he received that aspect. Then going into the DNC, he would receive the nomination from delegates or whatever. Then there was a second place and a third place guy. And Dean Phillips. So what happened to Dean Phillips, the second place guy, second most likely to be elected by the American people? Both of those guys just disappear and get skipped over, and Kamala Harris walks right in with 0 votes from the American people, right into the DNC, and gets into power and totally usurps the power of the American people in their right to vote. So this convention will last several days, with the vote set to close 6 p.m. on the U.S. East Coast on Monday. Like we said, the whole thing surrounding Biden dropping out of the race was sketchy. The signature on his letter where he was leaving, no letterhead, no official letterhead. The whole thing was sketchy. Even his people were saying he wasn't going to drop out of the race, and then that night he just drops out, and then we have to wait a half a week to hear from him, uh, to hear him personally come out and address the situation. So very frustrating. I would be very frustrated if I was a Democrat with getting my vote stolen, and then this whole, um, secret layers of who's gonna get in and whatever. Okay, so this now the conflicts overseas have ramped up. This is another expansion of power, or or an attempted continuation of power, and this is the entire West kind of escalating things. So these deals were originally struck to bring down the number of nuclear weapons, and we're seeing these deals be extended and extended and extended, and Russia followed and lowered down the nuclear weapons. The US did, or they say that they did, but now they're going to ramp it up, and then in response to this, Russia's going to ramp up production again of nuclear weapons. Letter to the Speaker of the House and President of the Senate on the amended agreement between the government of the United States of America and the government of the United Kingdom and Great Britain, Northern Ireland for cooperation on the use of atomic energy for mutual defense purposes, July 3rd, 1958, as amended. So I'm skipping down this letter. This letter is supposedly from Joe Biden, and it reads: the amendment removes the expiration date of certain provisions of the 1958 agreement that permit the transfer of certain equipment and material between the United States and the United Kingdom to enable broad and enduring cooperation, and make all provisions of the 1958 agreement indefinite in duration. The amendment also clarifies that Article 2 of the 1958 agreement provides for the exchange of atomic information and other related classified information, controlled unclassified information, technical data, technology subject to either party's export control requirements, sensitive nuclear technology, controlled nuclear information, as is jointly determined to be necessary for the development of defense plans, the training of personnel and employment of defense against atomic weapons, the evaluation of capabilities of potential enemies in the employment of atomic weapons and other military action of atomic energy, the development of delivery systems compatible with atomic weapons, in the research, development, or design of military reactors. So they want a complete um, continuation, no expiration date in sight of the transfer and building up of atomic power plants and atomic weapons. Now getting into Venezuela. This is the one of the coups that I talked about here. Comprehensive update on Venezuela. Maduro regime issues arrest warrant against the opposition leaders. So the president of the Supreme Court of Justice in Venezuela in exile declared this morning that OAS technical reports evidences Maduro's self-coup to cling to power. Since the highly criticized 2018 presidential election, which was marred by irregularities and lack of transparency, Maduro has consolidated his power through authoritarian tactics such as repressing demonstrations, imprisoning opponents, and controlling the judicial and electoral apparatus. The militarization of government and the loyalty of the armed forces have been crucial for his stay in power, despite deep economic crisis and international sanctions. So this he what they're saying is that, kind of similar to the 2020 election, he was losing, and then there was a spike and he won at the last minute. Um, very, very similar to what happened in Fulton County and all different city districts in the United States. But so they call this tyranny and authoritarianism when it happens in a different country. Here, it is a fair and free election, just so you guys are clear. U.S. dumps another 1.7 billion into Ukraine the very same day as U.S. national debt reaches 35 trillion. Now, 10 years ago, national debt was 16 trillion, or roughly 16 trillion. Now we're at 35 trillion dollars for the U.S. national debt, and sort of like all these other things, instead of saying, "Whoa, what's going on here?" This is a bad strategy. We're going to throw more money at Ukraine and continue to escalate things. Also, we have escalation in China. I reported that China and the Philippines were having a dispute in the South China Sea. So now the U.S. has sent warships to China's doorstep. The U.S. and the Philippine navies on Wednesday conducted joint training exercise in the South China Sea, where the U.S. ally and China are locked in a long-standing territorial dispute. So we've got escalation everywhere with all different sorts of things. We just sent a bunch of money to Ukraine. $1.7 billion is a lot of money. We sent that over there, but at the same time, we are engaging in diplomacy. I think this is a good thing, even though we're still funding the war over there. I think that this is a step in the right direction. So basically, what I'm reading here is that all these people were accused of espionage or trying to push for regime change, being a member of Ukrainian intelligence, certain things like that, or journalists that were released back to the United States. And then we released an FSB assassin, sleeper agent, somebody who sells U.S. Manufactured military grade microelectronics. Another guy who sells hundreds of thousands of illicit munitions, and then a bunch of other people. So then they say oil transit from Russia through Ukraine. EU rejects Hungary and Slovakia's request for urgent consultations. So the EU and Ukraine have done what they can to shut down oil being sold into the European market. They've blown up pipelines and they've just shut them off completely or sanctioned them and all that stuff. So these two countries, Slovakia and Hungary, are trying to have it turned back on so that they could buy it from there. I think it's probably cheaper for them, but the EU turned it down. So this whole section is about illegal immigrants. This first section is about the U.S. trying to use the immigrant crisis to pry into our privacy of U.S. citizens. Landmark ruling strikes down warrantless device searches of U.S. citizens' border. Landmark ruling strikes down warrantless device searches of U.S. citizens' border. So what they wanted to do was have everyone that comes through the border be plugged into a reader that goes through your whole electronic devices and tells them everything so that they could profile you. Now, your ID, your citizenship, an odor in the car, a canine hit on the car. Certain things I agree with that they could look into to decide whether you're there or not. But you are innocent until proven guilty on U.S. soil, as far as I remember. So to just pry right into somebody's phone and data is a complete lack of a complete lack of privacy that it goes too far. I don't agree with the border crisis, but this can't be taken advantage of to pass things that's going to take away a U.S. citizen's privacy. So I'm going to go through these articles quick. These are some crimes from illegal immigrants, a small percentage of illegal immigrants. I'm not saying they all come here to commit crimes, but I am saying that there's this minority within them that have a criminal nature. And we've seen a massive, massive uptick in domestic crimes from people that live here, but also crimes from illegal immigrants. And they're pretty horrific things that have been done. So, Salvadorian got away, arrested for killing woman during carjacking in the wealthiest U.S. county. She was at a gas station. She came out to see her car getting stolen, and she went out there to wave the guy down, like, "Hey, stop, stop!" And he came around and ran her over. So she was a grandmother, and she passed away on the scene. And this guy was a Salvadorian getaway. So, teen illegal arrested for throwing newborn baby in a dumpster. She says she had no choice but to abandon the baby because she didn't want her boyfriend to break up with her. Pretty horrible. Pretty horrible. Luckily, somebody heard the baby crying and the baby was fine and she got arrested. But okay, this guy, Cervantes Juarez Eleno, or Eleno Cervantes Juarez. Uh, this is his record here. And he got arrested this time for attempted second degree forcible rape, first degree kidnapping, sexual battery, and assault on a female. He is 150 pounds, 5'6". He is an illegal immigrant, and he was arrested the 29th of July. So, illegals admit to voting and registering to vote in undercover footage exposing Democrat election rigging scheme. Now, they could say, well, those things are disconnected, and everything that they can do to deflect from this being a scheme, like the article kind of implies. But so Democrats a long time ago set up sanctuary cities. Joe Biden has allowed the border to be overrun on his watch, and those people come to receive the benefits and to live in the sanctuary cities where they're being provided homes, phones, money, everything they need.
Está volviendo un poco más popular, por lo que le digo de Joe Biden, que está permitiendo el ingreso de los inmigrantes.
This is a birth certificate from somebody from China.
How do they leave China? Some of them will say, I go, where are you going? To camp. I go to camp.
So they incentivize them to come here. They provide them with, voter registrations and all kinds of things at the different departments when they're signing up for citizenship or, whatever. So then they come here and they get on our system, they register to vote, and then who do you think they're going to vote for? The person that let them in the country. And also the person who is going to give them those benefits and not deport them and all those things. So it is like incentivizing a new voting block. And then people will also say they can't vote. That's not part of how it works. So your whole theory is false. There's people, Democrat politicians, who are in court fighting to have illegals to have the right to vote. So it's not a made up thought, it's a real thing that is actively being worked on by one group. The group is the Democrat Party. Now, getting into the economy, some of these articles are confusing because I think some of these articles, like I said, there's a false sense of security and a false sense of reality that everything's okay and there's nothing to worry about and the United States is too big to fall. So there's some articles that paint it in a way that uh, fluff things up a little bit for you, and then there's a couple articles that just lay it down how it is. Um, the stock market numbers have dropped, the employment rate has dropped, the interest rate has not dropped, and it's creating this problem where the stock market people are waiting for the interest rate to drop, but the interest rate is waiting for the employment market, the unemployment to stay low, while the labor numbers also stay low. And those two things can't happen. If you're not working, you're on unemployment. So one of the numbers is going to have to go up for the interest rate to come down to allow the stock market to go up. And I don't really see any way out of it, but here's the numbers. Here, I'll give you the info, and you can, create your own opinion. People are being laid off faster than at any time since last summer, according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics on Thursday. This follows the report from payroll and HR company ADP on Wednesday, showing new job growth slowing to nearly a standstill. All this is according to plan. Nella Richardson, chief economist at ADP, said the labor market is playing along with the Federal Reserve's effort to slow inflation. That plan to slow the economy in order to fight inflation is the result of implementing modern monetary policy, or MMT. So they talk about how the pandemic gave them the excuse to implement this policy. So then Jerome Powell gets up there and says this. He says that the cut would almost certainly start an easing cycle, setting up for at least one more in 2024 and several more in 2025. The market has grown excited about that possibility. Stocks are nearly record highs. I don't know how he thinks that. The enthusiasm is understandable. The unemployment rate is at a relative low of 4.1%, according to the Fed's latest projections. Central bankers only think it will inch up slightly in 2025. So the Fed will be lowering rates to create a soft landing, a managed slowdown that cools off inflation. If it can pull that off, stocks would be off to the races. So that's what they're trying to sell people on so that they could stabilize the markets and keep everyone at bay where nobody panic sells. Now, they're not panic selling, but they are investing into safe bets. They're not taking risk bets, which is going to make part of the stock market crumble a little bit. Wall Street faces turbulent shift as traders rush to options amid political monetary uncertainty. On Wall Street, big trades that have held sway for years are getting reshuffled as the monetary political backdrop shifts. Now traders are hastily rushing to the options exchanges, paying up to protect or juice their portfolios after a turbulent week in the world's largest stock market. There is certainly an inflection point in sentiment, said Amy Wu Silverman, head of derivatives strategy at RBC Capital Markets, LLC. You are actually seeing demand for hedging in stocks like NVDA. I don't know what NVDA is, but that's not a stock that would normally be hedged, but now it is because it's a safe bet, or they're buying a ton of junk stocks. So they're saying that the size of the Fed rate cut may hinge on the job market. If the forecasts are right, the report would signal a slight cooling of the strong labor market and would add to the case that Powell made on Wednesday when he said, "What the data broadly show in the labor market is an ongoing gradual normalization of labor market conditions." So he knows that he's working with the labor market to artificially lower that so they could artificially lower the interest rates, bring up the stock market, but you're not going to have labor, so you're going to lower the economy. The whole thing isn't balancing out just yet for me. I'm not sure where they're getting at, so let me keep reading and I'll give you a chance to. Um, some fresh data stoked fears over an economic slowdown. The winds of recession are coming in hard. Stocks sold off Thursday, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average tumbling 500 points as investors' fear over recession resurfaced. The Dow dropped 494 points, or 1.2%. The S&P 500 shed 1.4%, while the Nasdaq Composite slipped 2.3%, and the Russell 2000 index, the small cap benchmark that has rallied lately, dropped 3%. The 10-year Treasury yield broke below 4% for the first time since February, in a sign that investors were seeking safe haven assets. That weak data comes a day after the Fed chose to keep rates at the highest levels in 2 decades, while Fed Chair Jerome Powell did give some investors hope by signaling a September rate cut was on the table. It was not enough for market participations on Thursday. And then this here is saying that we're already in a recession. Recession triggered. Payrolls miss huge, up just 114K as soaring unemployment rate activates SAM rule of recession. So the SAM rule is saying that 3 months of unemployment rises by 0.5% relative to the low of the past 12 months means that we're in a recession. So in our payroll preview last night, we asked, just how bad will it get? And we got the answer moments ago when the BLS reported that in July, the U.S. added 114K in payrolls, a huge miss to the expectation of 175K, and also a huge drop from the downward revised June print of 206K. So this was the lowest print since December of 2020, which is when the whole economy was shut down. So I've heard to this referred as stagflation, which is when there's supposed to be a collapse. There's supposed to be this huge inflation of things, but you push it out further by manipulating the markets and all kinds of things, manipulating them, push it out further, and now we're going to get hit with the inflation from 2020 now, and conveniently enough, going into the Trump presidency, where they could take all of Trump's accomplishments, push them out after COVID and act like that was a response to COVID and that they saved the world. But the bubble that they created could pop just in time for the election and then make Trump look bad again. So Trump, uh, you know, he'll have a lot to deal with going into this election, and I hope that he has a strategy for bringing that rate down and getting these stock markets back up and running and getting people back to being able to own businesses and homes and things like that. Right now, everyone's renting. Everything is a throwaway product. Everyone, is liquidating their portfolios to have enough money to spend on the things that they need daily. So, big problems with the economy, big problems with wars, politics, everything that's going on. It's all coming to a head right very, very soon. Like I said, I don't have a date. It's imminent that these things are going to be a problem. It's just a matter of when and how soon. But I think, like I said, these things are going to directly affect everyone in the short term, regardless of who gets in or regardless of what happens, because it's kinetic energy. It's already built up and ready to just go. So as soon as it gets let go, it's gonna go, and we won't have a choice. So be prepared. Buy some storable food or a water filter, certain things, grow a garden, whatever you can do to be prepared. Also, pray for this country and prepare your heart. And spread this information, like and share this video, send it to everyone you know, and get this information out there. Thank you for watching, and have a good night.